أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قاف والقرآن المجيد بل عجبوا أن جاءهم منذر منهم فقال الكافرون هذا شيء عجيب.
Living the Quran through the Living Quran, an audio-visual translation of Tafsir an-Nur of 𝐒𝐔𝐏𝐿 Qira'ati, translated by Salim Bemji and edited by Arif Huda. Audio version read out by the translator. In this 16-part series, we will be reviewing chapter number 50, Surah Qaaf. Part 6, verses 15 and 16, A New Creation.
أفعينا بالخلق الأول بل هم في لبس من خلق جديد ولقد خلقنا الإنسان ونعلم ما توسوس به نفسه ونحن أقرب إليه من حبل الوريد.
Verse 15. Did we, meaning Allah Azza wa Jal, show failure and weakness in the first creation, that we will not be able to repeat creation after its destruction? Rather, they, the disbelievers, are in confusion about a new creation after destruction of the old. Verse 16. And surely it is we, Allah Azza wa Jal, who created the human being, and we know what suggestions his soul makes to him, and we are nearer to him than his jugular vein. Thinking points. The word which has been translated into English as failure and weariness, ayyana, comes from the Arabic root word e, and it means helplessness and inability. And the word translated into English as confusion, labs, means tangle, mistake, and suspicion. Now, one of the words used in the verses under review, which has been translated as suggestions, is waswasa, which literally means a muted voice. And technically, it refers to the unpleasant thoughts which pass through a human's mind and one's spiritual heart. Another word used in this section of verses under review, which has been translated into English as jugular vein, is warid. This word comes from the Arabic root wurud, which means to go in search of water. And since this vein is responsible for the circulatory system between the heart and other parts of the body, it has been used in the meaning of an all-important part of the human anatomy, which we know as the jugular vein. When it comes to guidance that Allah Azza wa Jal must provide to humanity, before any sentencing can be meted out to them, every method will be used to guide those who have deviated from the path of the truth. In the previous verses, examples of the power of Allah Azza wa Jal as seen in nature, as well as examples of the dreadful outcomes of past nations was mentioned, those who denied the prophets sent by Allah Azza wa Jal. However, in these verses under review, the conscious and the intellect of the people is being stirred up and addressed. And those who reject the one true God are asked a rhetorical question. Was Allah Azza wa Jal incompetent for the first creation, that he is not able to recreate everything and anything a second time around? There is a similar sentence in another verse to what Allah Azza wa Jal has stated here, where he says, and we are nearer to him than his jugular vein. And in this other example from chapter 8, Surah Al-Anfal, verse 24, Allah says, and know well that surely Allah intervenes between a person and their heart. As for waswas, temptations, the source of these can be one of three things. The first is the soul and the desires of the soul, as God says in this chapter, and know well that surely Allah intervenes between a person and his heart to cause it to swerve. A second example is seen in chapter 7, Surah Al-A'raf, verse 16, where Allah says about Satan, Iblis continued saying, now that you have allowed me to rebel and go astray, I will surely lay in wait for them on your straight path to lure them from it. And sometimes waswas is caused by some human beings and jinn, as seen in the Quran in chapter 114, Surah An-Nas, verse 5 and 6. The one who whispers into the hearts of mankind from the jinn and humanity. The knowledge of Allah Azza wa Jal regarding our affairs is there for two reasons. The first reason, as seen in the Quran in chapter 67, Surah Al-Mulk, verse 14, is because He is our creator, and thus He knows His creations. As He says, is it conceivable that one who creates should not know? He is the all-subtle, the all-aware. And the second reason is given in chapter 50, Surah Qaaf, verse 16, because He surrounds us, Allah, from all aspects. In the Quran He says, assuredly it is we who have created the human, and we know what suggestions his soul makes to him, and we are nearer to him than his jugular vein. Therefore the knowledge of Allah Azza wa Jal is accurate, extensive, and immediate. As for why people doubt in the resurrection day, the roots of this doubt lie in one of two things. One is that they ask, how does Allah Azza wa Jal know what every person has done in one's lifetime, and where every minute particle of their body is after their death and decomposition? The second area of doubt is where they ask that how can He recreate each and every single creation? Well, this verse under review actually answers both of these queries, because at the first level, He, Allah, knows everything because He is all-knowing. He also knows the temptations, the waswas, which people experience. And number two is that He can do so because He created the human being in the first instance. So to recreate them, again, is not difficult at all. Takeaway messages. 1. The creation of everything which exists is evidence about the Creator's power to recreate. If the first creation is possible, then recreation is also possible. And some may argue that it is even easier. Number 2. When speaking to one's opposition, use the shortest and most expressive words possible to state a point. 3. The disbelievers have no real reason to deny the resurrection. It is only doubts which they harbor. 4. If a person wants to ensure that their belief system is healthy, then they must do their utmost to keep away from all forms of demonic whispers, waswas, and correct their soul, because denying the day of judgment stems from a person's lack of spiritual purification, which will lead their impulses to try and corrupt them. Point number 5, as we conclude, the comprehensive knowledge of Allah Azza wa Jal about the human beings is maintained throughout their entire lives. Join us in our next session as we review verses 17 through to 20 under the topic of the reality of death.